Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of At the Bar, where we get a chance to have conversations about health, wellness, and fitness. I'm your host, Brad Marshall. Today, I'm joined by Carrie Baker. So, Carrie, thanks so much for taking some time to spend with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for letting me join you on your podcast.
Yeah. So one of the things we love to do is get to know the guests that we have on the show and let them sort of tell their own story in as much or as little detail as you'd like. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, get the listeners to know who is Carrie Baker?
So, hi, my name is Carrie Baker. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I went to the University of Pittsburgh for undergrad, and then migrated south for warmer weather for grad school. Came to Campbell University and got my Pharm D, so my doctorate of pharmacy, and then my MBA at the same time while I was there. Really fell in love with the area and decided to stick around. So now I am a clinical assistant professor of pharmacy practice at Campbell University. And then I also work at a hospital in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where I get to be part of interdisciplinary teaching services on a daily basis. But fitness has been and always will be a large part of my life. So growing up, was a four-sport athlete. I played soccer, did cross country, was a gymnast, and ran track and field in the spring. And just really could never let that part of me go. So that's kind of what keeps me grounded, I guess, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love all of the different pieces to who you are, from the schooling to what you get to do now as a full-time career person, and then still get a chance to do some fitness. And we got a chance to meet at the gym, which is why I thought it'd be really fascinating to learn a little bit more about your story and your background and see what we can learn from that. So one of the places we love to start is what your fitness journey has been like. So you told us an athlete growing up, and now fitness is still a part of your life. So talk us through a little bit about what that was like. How did you come to play the sports that you did at a young age? And how long did you carry that through as you look at sort of your fitness journey?
So when I was younger, I was a very active child. I think that my parents needed to find a structured activity to put me in so that I didn't tear the house up. Um, so they started with soccer when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And I played that for a couple of years until I was around 7. Then I became really interested in gymnastics. I think I was kind of like trying to tumble off of the couch, which my mom decided was ultimately not very safe. So they offered me an opportunity to join a local club gym that we had where I grew up in Bedford, Pennsylvania, and the rest was kind of history. So from the time I was 7 until I graduated high school, I was a gymnast. So I went to practice for 3 days a week for 4.5 hours each day, probably from the time I was 9 years old up until I graduated high school. Um, but when I got to high school, I was like, oh, this isn't enough. So let me do some more. And I got asked to join the soccer team because I was a pretty fast runner. So I started high school and joined the soccer team as a freshman, and then did that playing varsity from ninth grade up through 12th grade. I was on the defense. I was a center back. So I like to call the shots back there. And then track, my mom was very involved with that. And by design, like soccer makes you a good runner. So I was a middle distance runner, all while still doing gymnastics. Thankfully, I had some pretty lenient coaches that would let me come late to the gymnastics practices and just hop right in right after track. So I ended up working out for like 6 hours a day. When I was in high school, it was fine. But I ran the 400, the 800, one of the relays, and then I also learned to pole vault my last 2 years of high school. I didn't do it the first two because I had a friend who was also a gymnast. I didn't want to compete against her in another sport, so I waited till she graduated and then picked that up. Finished high school, went off to college, was very focused on academics because I wanted to get into pharmacy school after just 2 years. Pharmacy is one of the only programs you can do 2 years of undergrad and then get into a graduate program with. So I kind of dropped off the fitness train a little bit there.
Mhm.
I was still running in the mornings for like 20 to 30 minutes, but I really lost like the overall I guess like body workout that I was used to getting, especially coming off of like 6 hour practices total in high school. So that was mentally a little bit challenging for me as an undergraduate student. Um, and then at the end of undergrad, so 2 years later, I did get accepted into pharmacy school, both at Pitt and then down here at Campbell. Chose Campbell because I liked the overall environment a little bit better. I thought it would be a better fit for me. And when I came down here, I found a CrossFit gym, and I'd been wanting to try it for a while because I had heard that it had a lot of gymnastics aspects and also like had some cardio. And I was like, oh, these are all the things I like. So this will be perfect. Jumped into it. Ultimately, the first workout that I did had strict handstand push-ups in it that I miraculously hadn't lost the ability to do. So fell in love, and the rest was kind of history there. But my fitness journey took a little bit of a turn my third year of pharmacy school. So I was doing a CrossFit like running workout on Campbell's track. I was doing like 100-meter like pole runs kind of. And the track and field jumps coach at the time saw me running and was like, hey, you. And I was like, oh, can I help you? Like, do you have a question? Are you lost? He was like, did you pole vault before? And I was like, yeah, 4 years ago in high school. And he was like, oh, well, you should come out for the team. We think you'd be great. So I accidentally locked on to the D1 track team at Campbell as a pole vaulter, using my redshirt year, kind of that 5th year of eligibility, and relearned to pole vault in a year. Ended up breaking Campbell's outdoor school record. So I still hold that record. And then after that was done, picked back up with CrossFit and really haven't ever stopped. So
Wow, I love all of the different adventures you've had and how all those adventures have played out over time. It makes a lot of sense now why you excel at the way you do at CrossFit. So I'm curious, as we go back into those grade school, high school years, those sports seem very different. Gymnastics, very body weight focused, a lot of awareness, tumbling, flipping, etc. And then soccer, very foot-eye coordination, cardio heavy. How did the balance play out with those, or how did you develop capacity, I'd say, in those different adventures?
I think I was always pretty good as like an endurance athlete because with gymnastics, we still had to do a fair amount of conditioning for like our floor routines and things like that, especially in the off season. And even my gymnastics coaches were like, wow, she just holds the same pace consistently over and over again. So I kind of like naturally had a little bit going into it. And then I work hard, I can proclaim that. So I put a lot of effort into just getting better. And I'm pretty stubborn. So
Mhm.
that worked out well for me also in terms of like developing the endurance side of things. For soccer in the off season, especially leading into that first year, we had practices, I think 4 days a week for like 2 hours at a time. And I tried to go to most of those. So that really helped with like developing that um, foot coordination, I guess, especially
Mhm.
for someone that had really taken a couple of years off from that. I grew up around it too. My brother played soccer as his main sport, and he's younger, so I would go to his games and stuff. So like I was very familiar with it visually. I just didn't physically have a lot of experience until um, high school. But I think it worked out pretty well because I had like I was the muscular development was there from gymnastics, so it set me up to kind of develop the fine motor skills, if you will, for soccer. um and yeah, it worked out.
And then one of the things, I love hearing how people's different backgrounds and upbringings and trying different things and figuring things out along the way leads to, eventually where they find themselves currently. And the other one that I think is very intriguing is the pole vaulting side of it. Anytime you think about leaving the ground and getting multiple, feet up in the air and then trying to work yourself over a bar seems very intimidating. What was that process like, learning how to pole vault and then having the chance at Campbell to bring it back and set a record?
Yeah, that was actually probably my favorite sport to learn. Like I wish I had had a little more time with that one. Because gymnastics really taught me like the body control that you need, and that's really important. Like if you have spatial awareness, when you're upside down, it's very helpful as it turns out. With that sport, you also have to kind of be a little crazy, um,
Yeah.
because you're trusting a fiberglass like style pole to spring you off the ground, and you can't really let go because, well, that would be bad. Um, but I went to a pole vault camp when I was between 10th and 11th grade at WVU. It was 4 or 5 days long, and prior to that, I was just stiff polling. Like I wasn't actually allowing the pole to be helpful. I was pushing my pole, not carrying it, which doesn't really mean a lot if you don't know a whole lot about pole vaulting. But basically, they transformed my pole vaulting abilities in 5 days, and got me clearing around 8 feet by the time I left there. And then the rest of it is just kind of honing in on the different tiny little details of that sport, because there's a ton of interactions that happen within like 15 seconds in that event. But it was crazy. It was crazy to have to relearn it then 4 years later. But I think that being a little older at that time and then having the CrossFit background helped from a like strength standpoint, because I was much stronger than I was when I was in high school. And the stiffer the pole that you can make bend, the larger the return on the top half. So it was cool to have to relearn it and kind of get a lot of lessons out of it. It taught me a lot of life lessons also, especially when I was in college doing it. So it was a time.
Yeah. So I'm curious to dive into that last piece you said. One, what ended up being the highest or the tallest jump that you were able to clear? And then two, you talk about some of these life lessons. I'm curious what some of those look like along the way, learning, especially at that college age when you really focused on studies, but now also having some fun with the sport as well.
So the highest height that I successfully cleared, I think, was 12 feet 4 or 5 inches, because it's in meters, so I can't remember the
Yeah.
exact like conversion, but it was right around there. So coming into college, the highest I had successfully cleared was 10 feet 6 inches, I believe. So that was
That's
a bit
that's
of
up there.
a
That's up
after
there. 12 feet off the
after
ground.
4 years off and coming back into it. It was pretty impressive. I had a lot of time when I first re-entered the sport, um, where I would perform well in practice, and then I would get to the meets and I would freeze up just because it was D1 college athletics. And I, before going into college, had considered pole vaulting. Ended up not doing it initially as an undergrad, but entering it with like the awareness of how good those athletes actually are after like watching all these sporting events at Pitt and then seeing like Division I athletes on TV. I initially didn't think that I belonged. So that was like a mental barrier that I had to work through and overcome. At some of the bigger meets, I would come in at opening height and feel like I didn't deserve to compete with some of the people that were clearing much higher bars. But I ended up having a breakthrough with that at an outdoor meet that I actually wasn't supposed to be at. They ended up messing up the number of people that they allowed to enter into the competition. So they were supposed to limit it to like 30, and they ended up admitting like all 46 people. And it was at NC State. So at the outdoor NC State track, I realized that I actually was good enough to hang with all the people. The opening height was around 11 feet, so it was higher than anything I had cleared outdoor at that time. And I didn't actually clear it, but I ended up being like 6 to 9 inches over it. And that was like the day that it clicked for me that I was capable. And so after that, my season took a turning point, and I went on to obviously clear the higher heights, 12 feet and over, and broke the school record. So that was a big barrier for me to overcome. I also had to work through, I guess, realizing that I was not being a perfectionist when it came to pole vaulting, just because I was relearning it. It was going to be different from what it was when I was in high school, and learning to trust my college coach, who I had literally met on accident. He ironically built that trust for me in the weight room. I was having a really bad day. We had found out that I wasn't going to get to compete at the first indoor meet of the season because of some like NCAA like regulations and rules, and getting some of the forms through with me being a 5th-year athlete. So I was frustrated. It had been a hard day, like on the runway. Things just weren't clicking. Like that happens sometimes. So we were at the end of the day, and we were the last people in the weight room, and I was like, I really want to do Isabel. So because it was what was programmed. And my coach was like, all right, let's do it. I'll do it with you. So we set up our barbells, and Coach TJ Harris got on that barbell and made it through all 30 snatches with me. And so after that, we definitely had a closer relationship. I started to trust more of like what he was saying. And that really helped me to like allow him to be the driver. Whereas like before, I came from a small high school, I had to make a lot of the decisions on my own, related to like which pole I was going to use, where I was going to start, like what I wanted to do. But that kind of transitioned it over to where he was the one in charge, and I really became more of just the athlete. I didn't have to think as much. I was able to just be athletic. So that was super helpful.
Yeah, a couple things there that you said that I think a lot of us can relate to. One, this idea of feeling like either we don't belong, or maybe we're not good enough, or some people call that even that imposter syndrome of, should I even be here with everyone else who's around me? One, I'd love to just dive a little bit more into that. And you said the moment you had the breakthrough is when you almost cleared that bar and had that realization of, I have the skills and talents to compete at this level. I'm curious if there's anything else that you noticed along the way, whether it was, sort of the way you talk to yourself, or a coach who helped encourage you along that way of working through that process of, I don't know if I'm good enough to be around all these other athletes, to, hey, I deserve to be here. And now all of a sudden, after it clicked, it sounds like things took off for you. So talk us through that experience or that journey a little bit more.
I'm definitely the worst positive self-talker ever. I would say that I berate myself internally more than anyone else ever could on the outside. So I do some pretty aggressive self-talk with myself. It's fine. But from a like positive words of affirmation side, I would say that my pole vault coach was really the one that was like, he knew that it was going to work out. Like he's the one that saw from the very beginning that it was going to be fine, that like I was going to clear high bars. Like he saw the potential even before I could. And I think the irony in that is that that also has transferred into my career. Like the current position I'm in, my boss last year, or my residency program director, knew that this was where I was going to end up way before I did. So I'm pretty stubborn. These people learned not to tell me these things and like let me have these realizations on my own. So they figured me out before I figured myself out, which is nice to have those people in your corner. And one of the things that my college coach did, kind of tying it back to pole vault, when he realized that like I was having that breakthrough that like, oh, I belong, on that day, he actually went and bought me more time to just sit and visually watch, or like visualize what other people were doing by watching the rest of the competition play out. So I like got to watch the girls that were clearing higher heights than me, like watch their warm-ups, watch their approaches, things like that. He literally went around and just made small talk with a bunch of the other jumps coaches so that the other people couldn't leave the track yet, so that I would have time to just sit there and like take in the entire experience and kind of just get more comfortable with being there when higher heights were being cleared. And I think that was also really helpful.
Yeah, it's amazing how well that lines up with what we know to be true around this idea of confidence or self-efficacy. Our belief in our capacity to do things is one, there's some self-talk involved, having that conversation with yourself. And even if it's not positive, there's still some productive self-talk going on there that you said you experience. But some other great ways we can build it, if we're struggling, is one, outside sources. Having a coach who can encourage us and sees that potential is really helpful, but also watching other people successfully accomplish what you are interested or want to, all really, really great ways to build confidence, which it sounds like you were able to experience and then sort of had that breakthrough moment. So kind of fascinating how even if we feel like we're stuck or we're not able to be as confident in the moment as we'd like, there's a lot of ways we can go actually build that skill to help us along the path. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing that insight. So I'm curious, you had all these great experiences. Fitness has taken its, turns and whatnot. When you think about what your current goals, aspirations are, intentions are, what comes to mind for you? Somebody who has a full-time career, working, no longer a collegiate athlete, but what are you working towards these days, or what gets you motivated or excited to continue along with your own fitness journey?
So I like endorphins. I'm an endorphin junkie at the end of the day. Like, I am a miserable person without it. You can ask my coworkers. Um, they'll tell you. So that number one is my like motivation. It's definitely my outlet. Like, I will never not do something with fitness. And my parents have even proclaimed that. They've been like, you and your brother, like, you're never gonna not be involved with something athletic. Like, you can't not do it.
Mhm.
I can't even make it through an entire week of family vacation without working out. So there's that.
Mhm.
In terms of my goals, I don't know. I've played around with that a lot, especially over the last 3 years. Two of those three were residency years where your career definitely is one of your top priorities, if not the top priority at all times. So that kind of was initially like a hard pill for me to swallow, because I obviously grew up with like not athletics being number one, but like secretly being number one.
Mhm.
I was a good student, I swear, but I definitely prioritized athletics and had to shift away from like, well, now I can't spend 3 hours in the gym because I don't have 3 hours to spend in the gym.
Mhm.
Um, so I've become a lot more efficient and like had to kind of cap myself at the time I can spend there. Like, I usually cap it at 2 hours no matter what I've gotten done. Um, I'm a really competitive person though. I used to try to say that I wasn't, and that's a lie. I'm very competitive. So I think I ultimately like still have the goal to compete, and maybe make it to some of the larger competitions like Wadapalooza and things like that. Ultimately at the end of the day, but also I've recognized now that like this is more of like a lifestyle choice for me to just continually be healthy. And it keeps me kind of like grounded. It's my outlet. It brings me down. It lets me focus. It's a good break for me. So things like that.
Yeah, I love that perspective of, one way we can frame up goals or what we're striving towards is to have that specific outcome goal. And maybe it is a large competition, like you said, but what we typically find to be way more effective in terms of sustaining it over time is to make it part of your identity or who you are. And so whether that's getting a workout in on family vacation or even in residency and everything seems to be really focused on your career, there's still moments that, hey, if I'm somebody who's competitive, I'm an athlete, I love the endorphins, then you're going to find a way to get the training in. And so having it be more of a lifestyle and the intentions there definitely is a more sustainable route. So I think that's something, we all can learn from, of making it more of a lifestyle, making it more of who you are. And that can certainly help us to carry it forward. And so along with that, I always love to hear, what are some of the habits, behaviors, things that you love when it comes to your own health, fitness, and wellness? I think the movement side of it is one of those more obvious ones, getting to the gym, taking class, whatever it might be. But for you, what are some of the other things that you love to do that help you along your health and fitness journey?
So I meal prep. If I didn't meal prep, I probably wouldn't eat, because there's just not enough time during the week for me to cook meals. So I usually eat the same meals throughout the week, which works for me. My lunch honestly is usually pretty similar, like from week to week, but it's things that I like to eat and I know that my body does well with. Um, so that's one of the big things that has been really helpful to me whenever I was first in pharmacy school. Like I didn't do that. I'm not honestly quite sure how I survived. But here we are on the other side doing much better. Um, I also have recently done a lot better with sleeping more. So I wake up at 4 a.m. every day to kind of start the day and get to work on time. Um, and I used to go to bed around 10:30, 11 o'clock, which if you do the math on that is not a lot of hours of sleep.
Mhm.
So I have within the last year done a much better job of going to bed around 9 or 9:30. And that's made a really big difference just by the time I get to the end of the day, because that's when I can work out. I still feel like I have energy and then energy to do a little bit more for work or whatever I have to get done in the evening. So changing my sleep habits has been one of the big things for me. Um, and then meal prepping is probably the other big thing that I do. I don't do a great job with like drinking enough water because I work in a hospital and that's hard at times. um,
Mhm.
but I try.
Yeah. And when it comes to your own nutrition, how did you go about figuring out how much to eat, what to eat, all of that? Is that self-learned? Did you work with somebody? How did you figure out and dial in for yourself what's the right thing to eat and how to go about that?
So coming off of gymnastics, whenever I was going from high school to college, like I probably took it a little, I think I probably learned by taking it too far, honestly. Because as a gymnast, like you're obviously very tiny. The way that your body is proportioned is different from how it's going to be like when you become an adult. And I didn't mentally really realize all of those changes that were going to happen when I got to undergrad, let alone like being in college. Like that's its own little change in itself. So I wouldn't say that I like had an eating disorder, but I was borderline on my way to one. And then I had a couple of friends that were really helpful in pulling me back from that. I used to obsessively track everything that I ate in a food tracker. I don't do that anymore because that was not healthy for me personally. Like that was bad. Um, but I kind of learned a lot about what the different macros were from doing that. So I don't put myself on like a strict diet because of how negative that kind of was for me a couple years ago. But I do like in the back of my mind kind of know what I should be doing.
Hmm.
I also know that if I don't give myself like a little bit of sweets or something sugary, I will end up binge eating that. So I have something small um, most days of the week just to kind of control that. And then I end up being fine because nothing in excess.
Yep. I love that. And one of the things I think that's really relatable is this idea of, things in moderation. Anything to far extremes, whether it's tracking every little calorie that you consume, that can lead down a challenging path, just like on the opposite of not being aware at all of what you're eating or what you're consuming can be a challenge as well. So finding the balance, making it part of your lifestyle, certainly helpful. And then figuring out, like you said, what works for you and then sticking with that. I'm curious about the sleep side of things. So you mentioned that you weren't sleeping maybe as much as you'd like, and that led to maybe some challenges in the gym or at work. Now finding that right balance for you. What does your sleep routine look like? Are there things you like to do before going to bed at night that help you get a restful night of sleep? Is it, whatever it might be? What helps you?
I usually don't have issues falling asleep. I usually sleep like I'm dead once I decide to actually go to sleep, which is nice. I know that a lot of people can't say that, so I'm very lucky to have that ability. I do like to shower at night though. Like I feel like that is kind of like the last thing that I usually try to do, and it's kind of like my time where I just let the day go. And then I'm pretty relaxed and unfortunately usually scroll through my social media as like one of the last things I should do. I should probably not do that. Probably need to change that habit. But I do that and then I usually just go to bed.
Yeah. So pretty simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say it's kind of funny the way that the pendulum, sometimes swings with some of these where we can get so focused on development or having a routine or being so dialed in that almost it becomes stressful, or we're not able to fall asleep as well, or whatever it might be, because we're so worried about the routine and what we're doing. So, if you're able to fall asleep and then get into that restful sleep, that's super helpful. On that side of this idea of nutrition and sleep and performance, do you do any type of tracking, bio tracking, things like that, that kind of keep you up to date on whether you're getting restful sleep, how you're feeling each day, what's your stress levels at? Like, do you do anything for that?
Yeah, so I have a Whoop. I got the Whoop because I knew that I wasn't sleeping enough and I live alone.
Mm,
So I needed something to regulate me. I think there's like back and forth feelings about how good or bad the Whoop is.
mhm.
Um, for me, it's been great because it's helped me to sleep like an hour more just by me being able to see the data and be like, oh, you needed to actually get 9 hours of sleep, but you got 4.5. Good job. Like that's not great. Um, so it's kept me honest and it really has made a big difference in the amount of sleep that I'm getting. Do I still get the amount I'm supposed to? No. I do good on the weekends though. So that's something. I also like all the other metrics that it gives me because I secretly am a very analytical person. When I'm not trying to be athletic. So I like seeing the heart rate variability and the respiratory rate. Things like that are very interesting to me. Even if it's not 100% accurate, I still think it's a fair enough picture of kind of like what's going on. And I think it's very interesting how sensitive this little device is to alcohol. So that's always intriguing as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. If you appreciate data, it gives you as much as you'd like to figure out how do I dial in and move things in the right direction. And one of the things that's interesting too is this idea of accountability and how that can play such a big role, whether it's a device that helps you to sleep more, a coach, or whatever it might be, how that can help play a role in it. So outside of sleeping, has wearing the Whoop and becoming more aware of all that data made any other changes or changed in how you make decisions or anything like that? Or is it more just, okay, that's good to know, but I'm going to, kind of keep doing what I'm doing?
Yes and no. For the most part, I would say I'm like, oh, okay, that's good to know. Good to know that I'm 27% recovered today, still gonna work out because it fits my schedule.
Hmm.
Um, but also I think that it's helped like if there are days where I'm feeling super tired and I look and I see that like my recovery is only 27%, for example, like cool, maybe I'll let myself not do the last piece because I already feel tired and I know it's not going to be quality anyways. I think that kind of ties back to the whole like I try to cap myself at 2 hours. So
Hmm.
like if I'm feeling really tired and my Whoop also is like, you're tired, you should sit down, then I'm more inclined now than I would have used to be to maybe like not do that extra piece that would push me to like the 2 hour limit and maybe cut it at an hour and a half of just quality. So I think it's just helped me it like across the board, whether it be sleep or working out. I think it's helped me to be more comfortable with quality over quantity, which with my current lifestyle is very important. So.
Yeah. And something that I like that you said there too is it doesn't dictate exactly what you do. Like if you still want to get a workout in, even if the recovery is not as high as you'd like it to be, we could still work out, but it just informs the decisions you make a little bit better. So that helps you to continue working towards those goals and aspirations you have. Like you said, you're an early riser, work all day. I think it is one of the more challenging areas to figure out of how do we balance, when you start looking at health and wellness and fitness of having a job, all the other outside factors that we have to do to get through our days, and figuring out how do we fit in, fitness as well as whatever other pieces help us. So from your perspective, what helps you when it comes to, time or schedule or fitting in these pieces of, making sure that you're taking care of yourself and still working and progressing towards the type of person you want to be?
I like I mentioned earlier, fitness in some capacity will always be a part of my life. So I like to guarantee myself at least an hour, even if it's
Mhm.
only an hour and I can't do anything extra. Like that time is the time that I will block out for myself. That is my hour. The other 23 hours of the day, if I can have that hour, know that I can consistently give to other people or help other people answer other people's questions. Um, so for me, it's really a rejuvenating hour. And because I
Mm.
know that about myself, like if I can just have that 1 hour of time that I control what's happening, it really helps me to be more productive throughout the day. And then also in a career that's very service based, it allows me to serve other people better, whether that be the students that I'm working with or the patients that I'm helping to take care of. I think it just helps me because it allows me to take care of me for just a little bit. I know that I've done something good for myself, and then I'm like, all right, now we can go be selfless.
Yeah, I love that. So really being strict on me time of this hour is for me. I understand the benefits it's going to give me, but also help me in my career and outside of that, which I think is really an awesome perspective to have as well. One of the areas that I'm very curious to hear your perspective on too, being in the pharmacy world, working in hospitals, also educating, the future potential folks who are going to work in the healthcare industry, finding that balance and working with people with their own health fitness journeys. We know how important movement, proper nutrition can be at chronic disease, illnesses, etc. How do you see those two worlds colliding with you working in the healthcare space of understanding how important movement, fitness, etc. is, and then working with people to maybe help them in their own journeys or how to get them started on a journey that could be helpful for them? How does that play out in your world?
Yeah, so one of the really cool things about the role I have, getting to work in a hospital and also getting to teach, I get to work with a lot of students, but I also get to counsel a lot of patients on their medications and things like that before they leave the hospital. And I am a big proponent of, at least in most facets of my life, practicing what I preach. So I feel like if I can't say to them, or if I say to them, like, well, I want you to do 150 minutes of exercise a week, or like, we're going to work towards that, like, I too should be able to say, well, I also at least do that. Um, and then same goes with like lifestyle modifications and like what you eat. If I come in and I say that I eat at a fast food restaurant every other day, but I want you to eat home cooked meals 5 days a week, like, is that really fair? Are you really going to trust
Mm.
what I have to say? So I think that part of it is like credibility. Like the patients and the students see how you're living your life, and even if you say not like to do what I say and not what I do, are they really going to listen to that, or are they also going to look at what you're doing and put more weight in that, in terms of influencing what they ultimately decide to do? So I think from that standpoint, having grown up always being like active and trying to eat fairly healthy, I think that that helps because I can give examples of like situations that I've been in or what I do, even if it's kind of like tailored down to someone who may be very overweight and just trying to lose a little bit of weight. Like, well, maybe for them it's walking for 15 minutes a day, but that's, you can still like give them suggestions and they look at you and they see that you actually are someone that kind of knows what you're talking about. So
Yeah,
that,
I think it's so important to have, people in the healthcare space who are modeling the types of behaviors that can help people along their own journey. So it does certainly help when you hear that from somebody about increasing movement or what you should be eating or how we could potentially get you off of medications, leading from the front in that regard. Because I do think that's such a challenging field of sometimes people want to, I don't know if get the easy fix is the right wording, but if you can get
the
a
quick fix.
medication for it, then maybe that's easier than making some other bigger lifestyle changes that could help in that regard as well. Do you kind of see that in your industry, or how does that play out?
Um, kind kind of most people, at least if they're like newly diagnosed with someone that I interact with from a medication counseling standpoint, they like to hear that they may not have to be on something for a really
Mm.
long time. So depending on the person, you can actually really motivate them to make those lifestyle changes. And especially like being in a hospital setting, sometimes that's a wake up call that people need just ending up there. And then they're really motivated to make changes that they previously wouldn't have been motivated to. So it's actually a really interesting time because you can actually make a fairly big impact in presenting some of that information to them in that situation.
Yeah, would love to hear that, especially, I think over the last 2 years now with the pandemic, it has been one of those wake up calls for people of what are the choices that I'm making and are they helping me along my own health and fitness journey, or maybe there's some areas that we can improve. So I think it's really cool to hear that you're seeing some of those same things in the people you get to work with.
Yeah.
Well, Carrie, I want to say it's been awesome chatting with you, learning about you. It definitely makes me feel better knowing that your background in gymnastics and soccer has led you to be a wizard when it comes to those movements in the CrossFit space. But it's been really fun to learn about your journey outside of all the fitness in your own career field and how that has played out in your own journey. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you again for letting me share my story.
Yeah. So if anybody is interested in following along with your journey, your own health and fitness, whatever it might be, where could people reach out or how do you interact with folks?
Probably my Instagram is the easiest, but I am private, so you have to request me. Um, but it's Carrie B 364.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So if you're interested in following along with Carrie's journey, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, look forward to seeing you at the gym. And thanks so much again for taking some time today.
Yeah, thank you.